Story 1. A friend I had known for years asked me why I was smiling. We were at my 20th birthday party, so I told him I was happy to be around my friends. His reply was, "If you knew what I wanted to do to you, you would never smile again." I stopped smiling, got my best friend, and left quickly. Story 2. I had a neighbor who was a friend of mine. We were both men in our late 30s. He was talking about another neighbor's family who lived in the same apartment building. He said something like, "When they moved in, that girl was in kindergarten. Soon she'll be driving. It's too bad she's not attractive. If something was going to happen, it would have happened by now." I responded with, "What?" He acted like he was joking. We were no longer friends after that. Story 3. Sometimes I think of turning on their gas and leaving them to die. She said it so casually. This girl was jealous because she loves her brother and enjoys spending time with him, but his wife does not like them being together. His relationship with his wife did seem a bit abusive, but she was talking about ending the lives of her sister-in-law and her 3 children, the oldest being 11 and the youngest 1 year old. After that, I did not try to reach out much. Story 4. When my parents were divorcing, they had a contentious custody battle over me while selling the farm. My dad suddenly gave my mom full custody, and I never knew why. My mom recently revealed that she offered him an extra $200,000 from the farm sale. He was already receiving $500,000 if she could keep me. I did not see or hear from my dad again until I was an adult because I was sold. My mom wanted me because she loves me. My dad did not want to pay child support. Story 5. Me. I was worried because he is the first guy I have dated who is younger than me, but he is actually kinder than the exes my age. Nail technician, yes, younger guys tend to be. When I was 40, my boyfriend was 17 and that made me uncomfortable, so I left her services. Story 6. My husband at the time, now ex-husband, stopped screaming and yelling at me and became calm and quiet. It was like a switch went off. He looked me right in the eye and said, "I'll just slit your throat and watch you die." I was finally able to leave 2 days later. That was 21 years ago. Story 7. Don't worry. If something happens to my husband, I'll marry you so you won't be alone for the rest of your life. Said by one of my husband's childhood friends, whom all my gut feelings told me to stay away from, when my husband excused himself to go back inside to use the restroom. I laughed awkwardly. He was dead serious. I said I'd be devastated, but I would eventually make peace with or without a husband. He cocked his head to the side and said, "You're not being honest with yourself. You'd marry me in a heartbeat. Any woman would. No, you are not a prize, fella. I would never date you ever in my life. The only thing consistent in all your failed relationships is you. It's not that you pick the weird ones. It's 100% that you are the Temu version of a man." 30 years later, and he's still single. Story 8. I was once in a psychiatric hospital for the criminally insane. Killed a man. Do not worry, I would never hurt a woman or a child, so you were safe. Story 9. I was on a date with a girl. She was strange, but I can be as well, so I did not mind. We were talking about ourselves, and I asked, "What are your plans for the future? Any ideas?" She looked at me and said, "I am schizophrenic, and I am going to kill myself." I asked if she was joking, but she was not. Story 10. I met up with a kid I was friends with in high school and had not spoken to much since then, about 2 decades later. He spent much of our time together talking about how much he hated his ex-wife and how he would often threaten her at gunpoint. I told him that he probably ought to seek therapy, and I did not speak to him again after that. Legitimate psycho. Story 11. I can never remember which one of my twin girls has the peanut allergy. Aren't I the worst? So you just make them both carry an epinephrine auto-injector in case? An epinephrine auto-injector? Story 12. My sister came to my baby shower with a journal full of prompts for me to fill out. She said she chose it so that when I die, my baby would be able to get to know me through my writing. She also said that she and her husband would renovate their guest bedroom into a nursery so they could take custody of my baby when I die. I was baffled and creeped out to learn that she was actively planning for my death in childbirth. My husband was so uncomfortable that he said he does not want her being alone with me or our son, which is not hard since she lives in another state. I think she has some seriously unresolved trauma about our mother dying young and not being able to have children of her own. She probably needs a better therapist. I donated the journal to the local charity shop. Story 13. I used to shuttle customers of my father's auto repair shop. Taking a man in his 50s to his home after he dropped off his car, he casually told me a story about how he used to rob banks. He said he was called the gentleman bandit because he did not use a gun and was always polite. I was 18 years old and very scared. Story 14. I asked an old man sitting alone at a bar what he did for work. He said, death. I asked if he meant taxidermy or funeral directing. He looked at me and said, I'd skin you alive tonight, adding that it wouldn't be the first time. I told him I was much younger, so if one of us had to die tonight, it definitely would not be me, and I politely excused myself. A couple of days later, I was at another bar when a middle-aged man struck up a conversation. I mentioned being cautious with men at bars since that comment and shared what the other man had said. He seemed shocked that someone would say that and replied, well, not all men are like that, before changing the subject to sports. I said I think sports are pretty dumb and are half the modern version of bread and circuses. He said, with a mouth like that, I can see why he said that. Story 15. A friend, who was pregnant at the time, was obsessed with my pregnancy. She kept saying I could still have a miscarriage at any time, that buying baby items before week 20 was like cursing the pregnancy, and that my belly was too small for a healthy baby, which was irrelevant. The day after my 20-week checkup, she looked me in the eye and said, even if they tell you everything is all right, it can still go wrong. It's not that I'm sensitive. I'm not. I had no reason to be, as my pregnancy was great from the start. She repeated this constantly. Her negativity and frequent talk about miscarriage were exhausting. She texted me to keep her updated about my appointments and even messaged again because she hadn't heard from me. I think she hoped I wasn't responding because something was wrong. After my child was born healthy and beautiful, I waited a few days before posting a picture. When I did, she liked it and immediately unfriended me. We're no longer in contact, but when I rarely see her at gatherings with mutual friends, she is still obsessed with my daughter and demonizing her, which is unreasonable because my daughter has no behavioral issues. Story 16. Sometimes I just think about how easy it would be to disappear and no one would notice. Said casually over coffee, it took me a solid minute to realize they were not joking. Story 17. I wish my husband would die so I could get money for not working too. This was said to me when my coworkers found out that I did not have anything lined up after leaving my full-time job to be a solo parent. My husband had died, and I was able to collect Social Security survivor benefits. Story 18. Pain and fear are the only tools you need to raise a child. Causing enough pain and fear will do for a while, but you always have to give the occasional object lesson in pain to keep the memory fresh. My father. Story 19. Early one morning, a coworker came out of the bathroom and walked over to me. I could tell he was unwell, so I asked him, "Hey man, are you all right?" He stopped and said, "Cody, I just had my third bowel movement of the day." Story 20. Ah man, I would tear that up. A 50-year-old man said to me in high school during a junior varsity football game. He was referring to the freshman cheerleaders while we held the yard markers. I was a senior at the time and said, "They are around my sister's age, so it would be weird for me," thinking that would stop the conversation. However, he continued with guy talk. I never returned after the halftime break. Story 21. You know why I like you? You never wear sandals. I see all these women wearing sandals. If someone was chasing them, they would not get away. Story 22. I could make you disappear and no one would care, not even your mother. My stepdad. Story 23. You're only having a girl because boyfriend's name upset God, she said. She also kept trying to touch my baby bump, and my boyfriend had to say something. My grandfather told me my daughter was going to have no breasts when she grew up. She was 11 months old. He never held her again, and I only see him because of my grandmother. Story 24. I used to work with a man who was somewhat slow and had a speech impediment. In a creepy sing-song voice, he whispered in my ear, "I'm coming inside you." What he meant to say was, "I'm coming up behind you." Story 25. Enjoy the next 24 hours. They probably meant have a good day, right? Story 26. I was a teenager being abused during my high school years. One day, my abuser and I were waiting for the bus to head home. He told a joke, and I laughed at it. He turned to look at me and said, "You know I could rape you right now," then went back to his friends. A few weeks later, we were on the bus heading home, and I asked him a question. He got mad at me and proceeded to describe in detail how he would assault and hurt me. He said it as if it were nothing and treated it like a normal conversation. Story 27. One of my friends pointed at a bracket on the ceiling and casually mentioned that he had once tried to hang himself from it. I nearly started crying. Story 28. In college, we were at a fraternity party, and there was a girl yelling outside because she was drunk and had been barred from the party. She had been barred from all the fraternity houses, from what I was told. I asked one of the fraternity members about her and what was going on. He said that she had been banned because she gave several guys gonorrhea or chlamydia. I can't remember which. She was a house hopper who loved fraternity parties and had been trying to sneak into parties in disguise following the ban. The fraternity member said, "I watched her be with many guys on that couch after parties. During parties, she would let you do anything. One guy choked her until she passed out. He tried to use both hands and didn't stop until he finished, then slapped her until she woke up again." Looking back, I realize how wrong it all truly was. The choking was unsettling enough, but she probably wasn't even sober or fully conscious during the sex. Plus, the sexually transmitted infection rumor ruined her reputation around campus. Story 29. I have years of experience. A submissive once told me he wanted to engage in sexual activity while harming me. Instant block. I receive all kinds of disturbing messages, but that was the most concerning regarding my safety. Story 30. I do not understand why everyone thinks lying is so bad. Everybody does it. Story 31. You're fired. Have a good day. The absolute nerve of telling someone to have a good day after firing them over text and never providing an explanation. That is sociopathic behavior. Story 32. When lying in bed with my ex-fiancé, he used to say, "You know I could kill you, right?" Or that he had fantasized about it and was capable of doing so. Story 33. Sister-in-law and brother-in-law relayed the conversations they had about what they would do with the body when their son murders someone, describing it in graphic detail. The child is 4 years old and was running in and out of the room the whole time. Story 34. I was on a plane next to a man who used to be a police officer in the 1970s in New York City. He told me how they would initiate all the new recruits by having them touch a prostitute in the back of a police car. Sometimes they were nervous, but some of the officers were eager. Then he told me one of his colleagues on the force was committed to a psychiatric ward for pointing his gun at his wife during an argument. The man said he went to the facility where the officer was being held and pretended to be a union representative. He told them, "Don't worry, I'll take care of him. I'll keep an eye on him. If anything happens, you hold me responsible." They allowed the officer to leave with him, and he was back home the next day as if nothing happened. Throughout the conversation, he periodically paused to make an unsettling grin. He found everything he was saying hilarious. I could tell there was no empathy in him. He offered to give me a ride when we landed, anywhere I wanted to go. Fortunately, I was catching a connecting flight, so I had a good excuse. Story 35. I was flying back to the United Kingdom from visiting my family in the United States. I had just moved to the United Kingdom on a fiancé's visa and was preparing to marry my British husband and start our life together. I was very happy. I had a difficult woman in the seat next to me, the kind who wants to talk to you no matter how hard you try to avoid it. I am a very shy person by nature and not at all comfortable talking to strangers, but she kept muttering to me while I tried to watch a show, read a book, or even pretend to be asleep to avoid her. She said things like, "Worst mistake of his life," and "got to stop him before it's too late." She was twitchy and agitated the entire flight. I could not get away from her fast enough. To my horror, she seemed to be following me or sticking close to me. She ended up in the security immigration line right next to me, still muttering. Finally, she burst out loudly enough to make everyone's heads turn. She said, "I'm going to stop that wedding from happening no matter what," with a completely insane look on her face. For a moment, I thought she was talking about me and my fiancé's marriage, and I was really scared, even though I had no idea who she was. Security did not like the look of her because she was pulled out of the line and taken away a few minutes later. When I got home, I cried hard into my fiancé's arms. I was convinced some crazy woman was going to show up at our wedding and try to stop it. Story 36. Recently, I hung out with some mutual friends during my cousin's wife's birthday. We were all in the same year together in high school. One of my friends casually shared a story about being held hostage during one of our religious retreats. I was shocked because I never knew about it, and such news would have spread around the school. My ex comforted her, and not once did my ex ever mention it. Apparently, a woman from Germany was staying at the nunnery where we had the retreat and randomly trapped my friend in her room. Story 37. Let's see what happens to you. I was in Vancouver waiting for a ride outside the restaurant when a middle-aged Russian valet door attendant noticed I was American and started making ominous threats about me and the United States government. This was a year or two before the election. What made it unsettling was the way he spoke in such an unbothered and nonchalant tone. He was making nasty threats yet sounded like he was casually talking about the weather. Weird experience. Story 38. A child once casually told me about the videos her mother makes of her being inappropriate with her brother. Story 39. She's a little tease, isn't she? A random man said to me at the park while my 5-year-old niece was waving and giggling as she played on the swings. I said, "Wait, what?" He laughed and replied, "Well, when they're that young, they don't realize how much of a tease they're being. Won't have to worry about being single when she's older. Will she? I never moved so fast in my life." Story 40. I was opening up to a guy I was talking to at the time about my childhood sexual assault. I disclose heavy trauma before anything gets too serious since it still impacts my life. He kept asking for more and more little details, and I thought he was just trying to get me to open up more since I was really vague about it. Then he made an inappropriate comment, and that was the moment I realized he was actively getting pleasure from it. I did not talk to him again. I still see him every once in a while, as he was a mutual friend of mine and another friend's, but oh well. I didn't tell anyone about it because I felt embarrassed for having opened up that much in the first place. Story 41. I used to be friends with a group of girls when I worked at an auto auction, a closed car dealer auction. I took a new job and met up with them at a bar one evening for a birthday party. One of my old friends came up to me and said she had some news. "So, you know how I've been cheating on Dan, right?" She casually told me that she had been cheating on her husband for the last few years with various car dealers at work and that she wanted to leave him, but he was supporting her and her daughter. I lost my temper because I had been cheated on in the past and knew how harmful it is. I also scolded her for not telling her husband about how she was just using him for money and said I would tell him if she didn't. There was a huge argument and I quit being friends with her and the others right then and there. All of the others knew, and most of them were also cheating on their spouses as if it were no big deal. Story 42. I was getting an ultrasound of my female reproductive organs once, and the technician said, "Wow, you have a lot of eggs. Thank you." Story 43. Skinheads have the right idea. They just lack organization. Story 44. I knew when he married you I lost an opportunity, but now that he's gone I have a second chance. Said by an acquaintance from church just 2 weeks after my husband's passing. The guy was married at the time I got married. After the accident, he offered to take me to dinner. I thought it was one of the several, "oh you poor thing, let me feed you" type friendly meals, but no, he was dead serious and that was a real date. I did not follow up after. Story 45. And I didn't even beat you up or anything. This was said by a maintenance person installing something in my apartment as he was getting ready to leave. It was made even worse by what he said when he arrived. "You live here all by yourself? Little thing like you." This man was built like the Night King from Game of Thrones, tall with no fat on his body. He was almost a foot taller than me. I was very scared. I am also pretty sure that he didn't believe my description of my imaginary boyfriend who lived downtown but just decided that day was not a homicide day for him. Story 46. Recently, from my favorite mother-in-law, you look too thin. That stung so hard. Story 47. I wish I could take you home like a pet. Have you ever considered being a pet for hire? Story 48. Got into a conflict with an ex-boyfriend who recited a Walter White and Heisenberg quote word for word. He was being serious. Story 49. My 6-year-old niece once casually told me, "You are going to die before me." I said, "Maybe." She unsettled me, and I unsettled her right back. Story 50. I'd melt him and bathe in the slop. My ex-friend said this with a completely straight face, as if it were casual conversation. Story 51. You know I can do whatever I want to you. You walked into my house. Story 52. Not to me but to their therapist I worked with at a mental hospital for kids with reactive attachment disorder. He was 17. I want to harm you so badly right now. Story 53. A neighbor at university casually told me that he was a hooligan who explicitly enjoyed ambushing rival fans who were not part of his group. I then realized that he fit into a type of person they might be attracted to. He was rather short and had a baby face but was muscular from working out at the gym with a focus on muscle mass. He probably always felt weak and belittled and found power and validation in violence. Story 54. A girl a long time ago told me, I think putting random men in jail for false rape accusations is funny. I would do it too if I had the opportunity. I have no clue why she was comfortable enough to tell me this. We were in college. Story 55. I was ranting to a guy about how the grade I got was inadequate and it feels as if my world is ending. I might as well just end it. I was being melodramatic, obviously. His response was something along the lines of, "Do it near me so you are still warm." Story 56. Me at kindergarten meeting with another mother. Your little boy has such beautiful eyes and long lashes. Her. Yes, I love them when he cries. It makes me want to pinch him to get those tears welling up. What the heck? Story 57. Troubled grandchild living with us. Husband finds a switchblade sitting on a table and assumes grandchild is self-harming. We go to bed. Husband turns off notifications on his phone at night. He wakes up in the morning to dozens of texts from troubled grandchild, culminating in the message, I hang with dangerous people and sometimes I need to kill them. Grandchild was removed from our house that day at the request of my crisis counselor. Story 58. A red-headed friend who was dating another redhead was telling us, a group of friends, how much he liked the girl and about the future he foresaw with her. He ended by saying, if we have kids, they better be boys because I don't know if I could resist that red hair. We, the group of friends, were horrified. Story 59. I'm diabetic and used to be in the rave scene. A friend of mine many years ago met a girl at a rave I didn't attend, and he brought her and her disc jockey friend back to my house after the party. It was morning and I was about to eat, so I started taking insulin. The guy looked at me hungrily and said, that looks really good. I was confused, and he clarified that he likes heroin and my needle was clean. So that was unexpected. Then he also told me he's a vampire and likes to drink blood. He was asked to leave. As a child, the worst was from my mom. She was not a happy drunk and would often tell me how she would bury herself in a hole in the ground without a marker so I could never find her again, or we should just throw her in the trash. Sadly, that still stays in my mind sometimes. Story 60. A customer, when I helped him take a cart of heavy parts out to his truck, said, you know, I could push you right into the back seat and drive away, and nobody would know you're gone for probably a few hours. I refused to help this customer going forward, and I also never turn my back on him or the direction he is in when he is in the building. I legitimately fear for my safety around this man. Story 61. My friend's former husband told me he didn't believe rape was real because if a vagina is dry, it is impossible for a penis to enter, and if a vagina is wet, that means she likes it and therefore it is not rape. He was a reprehensible person. Obviously, he ended up abusing her, which is why they got divorced. Story 62. Taught music in elementary school. The cutest little girl with dimples came up to me and said, I went to the dark place in my dream again last night. Story 63. My uncle told me that if the raccoon comes back into my bedroom, I can use my taser on it. Story 64. Trigger warning. Suicide. It is always quite unsettling when people talk very plainly about ending their life, especially when you are hearing it from them for the first time. I have wanted to state this stuff plainly to friends when I have felt that way but have not because of how disorienting it is to hear. Story 65. I was on holiday with a few friends when my friend casually pulled me aside and told me, I just masturbated to a picture of you. I was single, he was not, and his girlfriend was on holiday with us. My response was, I wish you didn't tell me that. I was dumbfounded and didn't know what to do, so I kept avoiding him. I thought maybe he was angling for a threesome. He ended up hating me after that because he thought I believed I was too good for him. Now, I am really good friends with his ex-girlfriend, and we have a good laugh whenever we remember this story. Story 66. When I told my supervisor I had cancer and would be out for several weeks receiving treatment, she replied, Oh, you're going to get so skinny after the chemotherapy. Like it was a good thing. Strange. Story 67. A neighbor who was just diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder turned up at my door randomly and burst into tears about it. It turned out they just wanted to scope out my place so they could happily diagnose me with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I am a multiple job holding student who does not feel like cleaning until the weekend. They gleefully asked, So, how do you feel about having attention deficit hyperactivity disorder? I am going to make you love yourself. At that point, I started avoiding them with a firm boundary of polite only. After all, not only were they unqualified, but they were also getting way too involved in controlling other people with their nonsense. Story 68. Brains feel a little like soft pasta noodles. Eggs smell like the inside of a chicken. I am a veterinarian. I know, two different people. Story 69. We could follow them home, referring to some female classmates. A friend and I looked at each other with a blank expression. The other guy never did anything and eventually stopped attending classes. Story 70. I am going through a miserable breakup right now where my ex is still living in my house and claiming squatters' rights. A friend, who can be somewhat dangerous, texted me. Also, if you need removal services, that can be arranged. Story 71. I was in my early 20s working at a mall. It was around 8 p.m. when a customer came in. After interacting with him a bit, he told me that I looked like the type of girl Theodore Bundy would have liked. Story 72. You have beautiful eyes, like in Bullen's eyes. It is said her eyes were black and beautiful. Oh, thank you. She got her head cut off. That's right, she did. Story 73. A friend of a friend was at a pub with a group of us, all men, and kept talking about how unintelligent his girlfriend is. It was already uncomfortable, and people tried to change the subject a couple of times. Then he said, Women are basically just children, except you do not get in trouble if you have sex with them. One of the few times I have ever genuinely said, What the heck? Out loud in response to someone saying something. We left the guy, and the main topic of conversation for the next few days was what was wrong with him. Story 74. I had a friend say to me before I flew on an airplane for the first time after my father died in a plane crash, You never have to worry about flying since your dad died in a plane crash. What are the chances you would both die in an airplane? The last conversation I had with my father before his fatal crash, he said, There is no way I'll die in a plane crash this year. What are the chances two men named Errol would die in crashes back to back? Two men named Errol did, in fact, die back to back. Now I have anxiety every time I fly. Story 75. It's a toss-up between a guy I was friends with telling me he was into necrophilia or my ex saying, If we had kids and you wanted to leave, I would take them away and you would never see them again. Keep in mind, we were not arguing and I was not even pregnant. Both creeped me out pretty badly. People on here defended the necrophiliac, though. Story 76. I am going to stab him with this. He gave me the folding 8-inch fish knife and I broke it in half. I apologized to him because he was a close friend. Story 77. Had a relationship and life-altering discovery about my long-term boyfriend a few weeks before a planned and paid trip to visit my family. I decided to continue working on the relationship and proceeded with the trip as planned. The day we returned, he said in passing, almost giddy, "See? Everyone loves me. Now you can't break up with me." It was very eerie, and I did, in fact, break up with him weeks later. Story 78. Had an ex tell me he would make love to me until I bleed, and had a guy on an app ask to castrate me. Story 79. I was a 19-year-old female waiting for a flight in an airport when a man in his late 60s asked me if my lip piercing meant I enjoyed pain. He said he could hurt me if I did, in a sexually suggestive tone. Story 80. Mother said, "I left because I would have killed you too, the children and your father." She told this to your father, who was alarmed, to say the least. Story 81. I drive a bus for a living. One time, a very drunk man got on and was rambling about random things. He casually mentioned that he was kicked out of the military because, while deployed in the Middle East, he shot an innocent civilian in the face while his son watched. I was speechless. Story 82. My ex-boyfriend once told me that he could not wait to go to the mountains with me so he could go all Brian laundry on me. Yes, that is real. I have it on voice recording. Safe to say we are not together anymore. Story 83. I worked in a bakery years ago. While I was working at the counter preparing something, my colleague sneaked up behind me, put a knife to my throat, then walked away and laughed. That was a disturbing experience. Story 84. My brother jokingly called me ugly, and a coworker in his 40s said, "Ah, don't call her ugly. I would take her home." I was 22 at the time. Later, I found out he had assaulted another coworker. Story 85. I had a coworker ask, because I'm the one on the crew with experience with drugs, if I knew somewhere to get Rohypnol. He said it was for his wife's non-consensual fantasies. Story 86. My mom told me I was sexually assaulted when I was about 4 years old. She never got to the bottom of it or protected me from it happening, and I have fully blocked the memories of it. Story 87. Mine came in a text message. I am adopted, and my biological aunt, whom I had only met once, was in hospice in another city. I made arrangements to visit her, and she texted, "Be sure to call before you leave. I don't know where I will be." Story 88. A long time ago, I worked event security. I was working an NSYNC concert backstage. One of the roadies or stage crew was coming by to chat during breaks. He was bored, probably using drugs, and had been up for 24 hours at a time, needing to talk to someone. There were many crazy stories, but two stood out. At a metal show he worked years before, they apparently lost the bolts for most of the upper rigging and used a combination of industrial zip ties and duct tape. The punchline was they didn't inform the crew rigging the lights afterward. What made me tell him to stay away from me was when NSYNC took the stage, and the roar was deafening. He wandered over and said that if you stick your genitals on a metal railing, nothing makes you ejaculate harder than the roar of 14-year-olds. Story 89. So I've locked him in the house and removed his keys so he cannot go out with a friend today. That was my best friend at the time telling me she had actively locked her husband in the house because he had a day out planned with a friend she did not like. She was annoyed when I suggested it was not something she should have done. Yes, she is absolutely irrational. Story 90. My mom is probably in a difficult place because she practiced Spiritism, a Brazilian religion. My mom was the best, most caring, and empathetic person I ever met. Story 91. I was 16, and the family friend and contractor who remodeled my bedroom called to talk to my mother. Before she picked up the phone, he said to me, "I wish I was there right now so I could touch you." This frightened me, and I avoided him from then on. Story 92. I could harm you out here and no one would know. On a first date going to a lake. Story 93. My cousin has always had a problem with my weight. He is a hateful person. At my mother's memorial, he asked me where my husband was. I said he was over there. Then he said he thought he would be lying on the train tracks. Story 94. Gave a man a ride from work. He was a temporary employee hired through the work release program at the county jail. It was 4:45 p.m. He calmly said, "If I am not back by 5 p.m., I will be considered an escaped felon." Got him to the front gate at 4:58 p.m. Story 95. "I'm going to follow you home," said a stranger on the street hitting on me. "Don't worry, I'm not going to assault you," said a random man I was chatting with at a conference, trying to convince me to visit him. "Are those real? Your braces, are they real?" "I think braces are attractive because then you know the girl is underage," said a random man at an anime convention. Story 96. I was called a media rat for caring about the Epstein scandal. Why would I care about a group of wealthy older men accused of sexual misconduct? Because those individuals pose a genuine threat to society and hold high-ranking positions of power. People are often conditioned not to care about important issues. Story 97. My daughter, who was 7 at the time, was having a sleepover with a friend at our house. The girl was playing when I came into the room, and she started talking to me casually about what they were doing. Then suddenly, she said, "My dad has custody of us because my mom is abusive," and went back to playing. I was surprised. Later, I spoke with her dad when he came to pick her up. I mentioned that she probably needs a gentle reminder not to share that kind of information. I also said I was glad she felt comfortable enough in my house to open up, but it is not our business, and other parents might not be comfortable with it. He seemed a little flustered and said he would talk to her. I felt bad, though. Story 98. Standing in a coffee line in broad daylight once, I had an old man behind me say quietly, "I like your skin. I am a short, white, average-looking woman." My skin was not in any way unique. I had chills. I said, Thanks." This was a poor response, but I was confused. I was so uncomfortable with him throughout the rest of the ordering process that I just ordered a drip coffee to be quick about it. I then left very quickly, even though I had wanted to stay and enjoy the patio seating, but definitely not after that. Story 99. He was happy for having hurt me until he saw me with nothing. Story 100. My now ex expected me to let her go on a date with another man to see if I am still the right person for her. For her clarity, of course. Story 101. I work in the outpatient medical field, meaning people drive to my office for treatment. A woman very casually says, "Yeah, I really struggle to keep my eyes open while driving. No big deal." Story 102. I had a female friend tell me that the scene in the movie Irreversible did not disturb or repulse her, but really turned her on. This conversation happened more than 5 years ago, and I have not stopped thinking about it. Story 103. I had a man I knew slightly from a coffee shop tell me he had sex with someone underage while we were just sitting there catching up and chatting. Another man told me he had sexual intercourse with his golden retriever as it walked by us in his backyard. People tell me things for various reasons. Story 104. You look just like my ex, said in a way that was too intense. Story 105. A work colleague had been experiencing mental health issues for some time. She was eventually hospitalized in a secure facility for a couple of months for her own safety and the safety of others. Later, she returned to work. It was clear that she was not the same person. The day she said she had a knife in her bag was the last time we saw her. Story 106. I ended my relationship with him after that. Story 107. Just stand there and look pretty, girl. I was newly dating. Story 108. I was working at Starbucks one late May. A customer came in and, as baristas do, I was making friendly conversation. I joked about April Fool's Day and asked if he had any pranks planned. He responded, "I love pranks. I love pulling pranks on people, except when they get hurt." He was staring glassy-eyed at the counter, making no eye contact, completely emotionless. I hate it when they get hurt. I didn't even know what to say, so he took his drink and left. Story 109. I was diagnosed with a mental health condition at age 15 after years of suffering in silence. I considered ending my life during that time. Upon formal diagnosis, my mother told me, "Your doctor and I knew from the time you were 7, but we thought it was important for you to figure it out on your own." I have tried to rationalize that she was doing what she thought was best at the time, but there is a part of me that will probably never forgive her for those 8 years I suffered without treatment. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.